How's it going, everyone? Nick Templin here from Templin Scouting, and my final mock draft for the 2026 NHL Draft is here. So without further ado, let's get into it. I just want to just make the point that this is more of a predictive mock draft and less of a mock draft purely based off of my own rankings. Uh, Once I get into kind of the later rounds, I do use my own rankings a little bit to kind of dictate some of the later picks, but I tried to keep things as much to consensus as possible while also trying to make a few predictions here and there. So, with that in mind, let's get into it. Starting off with the first overall pick, we have the Toronto Maple Leafs selecting Gavin McKenna with the first overall pick. This one feels pretty set in stone. In fact, there's reports out there that Toronto has already told Gavin McKenna that they intend to select him with the first overall pick. I think this makes a lot of sense. I mean, you don't get these kinds of premier playmakers in the draft very often, and I think that he kind of gives them a chance to kind of extend the window right away. With Austin Matthews and John Tavares and William Nylander, and they've just brought in Darren Radish on a long term deal as well. So I think there's a lot of upside for this Toronto Maple Leafs team coming into next season. Obviously, still got Matthew Nyes there as well. So a lot of great options, and Gavin McKenna just kind of adds to that. I kind of mentioned this in my last video, but I'm kind of wondering a little bit speculatively about whether or not Gavin McKenna might actually play on the off wing at the next level. Just to kind of fit in with the lineup a little bit better to have Nyes play the left wing and McKenna on the right on the other side of Matthews. So just a possible thing they might look to do, kind of similar to Nikita Kucherov, who also plays on the offside. And I think Gavin McKenna's kind of closest comparable at this point really is Nikita Kucherov. Overall, just amazing luck for the Toronto Maple Leafs to have lucked into getting Gavin McKenna this year. With the second overall pick, I do have the San Jose Sharks selecting Ivar Stenberg, and this seems pretty set in stone now since William Eklund was traded to the Ottawa Senators, so that leaves a bit of a gap now down the left wing for the Sharks long term. And Stenberg, I think, is going to build a really good some really good chemistry with Macklin Celebrini. I think their play styles will be very complementary of each other, and I think the two of them will play a really strong 200-foot game as well, on top of the really strong offensive game. So my closest comparison for Ivar Stenberg right now has been Philip Forsberg all season, because I just think he's such a mature 200-foot player with great instincts in the offensive zone, good setup man. Maybe not quite the shooter that Philip Forsberg is, but really not that far off either. So this is a really good selection for the long-term future of the San Jose Sharks. On to the next pick, and this might be where things start to differ for people a little bit, and particularly it starts to differ a little bit from my own board. But I have Chase Reed going to the Vancouver Canucks, so we'll kind of talk through this one a little bit, because I think a lot of people are going to expect that Caleb Malhotra goes here, following the hire of Manny Malhotra as the head coach of the Vancouver Canucks. In my mind, I think that that's a really challenging position to put a rookie head coach into. Obviously, I don't think Caleb Malhotra makes the Canucks in his first year. If they were to select him, I think that another year of development and going to Michigan State, where he's currently committed to play next season, will be a really good step for his development. But I think that long term, I think that's a challenging position to put Manny Malhotra in. Because you can be as professional as you want, but there's always going to be these potential issues with nepotism there, that you just don't want to really chance there. So while I do think that that is potentially the best available player at this point for Vancouver, and while I do think that he is probably a good fit, I think they might pivot to looking at some defensemen here, especially because it's such a defense-heavy draft at the start, and then it kind of falls off later on where they have some of their other picks, so they can kind of stack up on some offensive players with some of their later picks there. So I have them going Chase Reed. He's not the number one defenseman on my board. He's actually not even the number one right-handed defenseman on my board. That would be Keaton Verhoff. But I am trying to kind of keep up with the consensus here of what I think will happen here. And I know that Chase Reed, for most people right now, is their number one defenseman. And specifically number one right defenseman. And I do think that they want to target the right defense a little bit more than the left right now because I think they feel really good about what they have in Zeev Boyum going forward. So I think they have their number one left defenseman kind of locked up. So if they want to try and target a potential number one right defenseman, I think Chase Reed is a really good option for that. Just kind of, it allows some flexibility going forward as they continue to rebuild this roster to see if potentially Philip Hronik is somebody they might want to move on from. I don't necessarily think that'll happen right away, but I think once Chase Reed gets closer to being NHL ready, I think that that's something that this would allow them to explore. With the fourth overall pick, then I do have the Buffalo Sabres selecting Keaton Verhoff. Now, I do want to have a bit of a disclaimer here because this is being recorded the day before the draft, and Buffalo does currently hold the fourth overall pick following their trade of Bowen Byram to the Chicago Blackhawks. But I do believe that Buffalo is actively shopping this pick at the moment. I think that for them and the current position that they are in, they're looking to add some current ready talent to the roster there. So some names have been floated around, like Connor Hellebuck potentially, if he'd be willing to go there, as well as Jason Robertson has been brought up recently, and even Dylan Larkin potentially, but that seems unlikely because of the center depth that they currently have. It will be interesting to kind of keep an eye on this pick for the next 24 hours here to see where it does potentially end up. But I do think if they end up picking, and I don't think it would be a bad idea for them to just stay and pick here, I think Keaton Verhoff is a really good fit for them long term. I think he'll complement some of their more offensive defensemen really well on the right side. I think that he would play really well with Dahlin. I think he could play really well with Power. And I know they did draft Radim Murka last season, but I do think that Verhoff obviously higher ceiling than Murka. And I do think that, they definitely still need to find some players, some right-handed defensemen. They really tried to take a chance on Michael Kesselring last year. Didn't really work super well, but you can tell they like these kind of more sizey, defensively responsible right-handed defensemen, and they're continuing to kind of fill that void long term. And I think Keaton Verhoff does a great job with that. For me, his comparable would be Aaron Ekblad. With the fifth overall pick, I have the New York Rangers selecting Carson Karls. So surprisingly, I do have Caleb Malholtra continuing to slide a little bit here, and I'll kind of talk about that a little bit. But I do think the biggest need for the Rangers right now is on defense because if you look at the core that they've been trotting out the last year or two, it is pretty shallow in terms of talent right now. Right now, their left defense, they've got Gavrikov, and then Matthew Robertson was pretty solid, but not necessarily a top four defenseman long term. And obviously, there's been reports that maybe Gavrikov is upset with the direction of the team following the long contract that he signed there. So potentially, there might be some drama there where they might need to sort that out. But even regardless of that, I think that, filling some holes on the left side of defense long term are going to be really important for them. There's even rumors that Fox might be a potential trade candidate in the distant future, not immediately speaking, but so having another guy who could potentially run a power play for them would be really good, and they kind of need that anyways because when Fox went down last year, they really didn't have any offensively minded defensemen that could run a power play for them. So I think right now that's their biggest need, and I think that Carson Karls is a really great option. I do think there's a few things he needs to work on his game. I think especially with regards to being a power play quarterback, I think he needs to increase his ability to make accurate tape to tape passes on one timer opportunities. Because far too often in his tape, I'm seeing guys have to stop pucks that he is passing to them because it's not quite in the wheelhouse, and then take a second before shooting. Obviously, that makes a huge difference once you can make the proper tape to tape one timer wheelhouse pass for creating offensive scoring opportunities on the power play. But I think he's a really great skater. I think he shows a lot of prowess as a defensive player as well. Overall, I think productivity wise, he was one of the most productive defensemen in this draft as well. So definitely a guy to keep an eye on. And I think the fit here is good for the Rangers because I don't think there would be too much on his shoulders right away, but I do think that he would fill an important role for them long term. And finally, the fall of Caleb Malhotra ends here because I do think he's the fourth best player overall in this draft, potentially even the third. I think he's pretty close in value with Verhoff on my board. Caleb Malhotra is the only player in this draft with the real upside to be a number one center in the NHL, and for him to fall here to Calgary is just kind of a dream come true for this team because they really do need their future long term number one center, and Caleb Malhotra can absolutely be that because he has all the tools. He's a 200-foot player, handles his physicality well. He is a great passer, good offensive IQ, knowing when to shoot. I wouldn't call him the strongest pure shooter out there, but as far as his ability to shoot, it is definitely on par with what you would expect of a prospect of this caliber. He is kind of used in an interesting way on the power play in Brantford, where because they have so much talent, he is kind of the down low and net front kind of guy, which I think can also translate pretty well to the next level. But I think he can also be used in a variety of ways. It'll just be a little bit of development to kind of change his role. So it'll be interesting to also see how he gets used at Michigan State on the power play to see if they kind of make him into more of a shooter or if he kind of becomes the high slot guy or something like that. Like there could be a few different ways that his skill set could be utilized in the long term future and for his development. But overall, like if he's still here on the board for Calgary, I think they'll be running up to the stage to make this selection. So I really do think too that if he gets past Vancouver, like he probably will end up probably also getting past the Rangers. So I think that Calgary would certainly hop on that opportunity to bring him in. Next up with the seventh overall pick, we got the Seattle Kraken selecting Daxon Rudolph, one of the guys who I think had one of the best second halves to the season amongst these top defensemen in this draft. He has good size, great skating ability. Love to watch him play with the puck. I think he looks as comfortable with the puck as really any of the defensemen in this draft. He uses his physicality well along the wall, but I think he could really learn to use it a little bit better in open ice. So that's kind of a next step for him. But I do think, his long term kind of upside, he's definitely a top four defenseman, could potentially develop into a top pairing defenseman. Definitely can run a power play. Not 100% sure if he's going to be a power play one guy or a power play two guy long term, but I think he definitely has the upside to do either one. I think there's a little bit to work on defensively, but I think that he looked a lot better down the stretch in the WHL playoffs this past season than he had for some stretches of the regular season. So it's definitely good to see that that's coming along with him. Definitely one of the top defensemen in this tier of really good defensemen for this draft. Next up, we got the Winnipeg Jets, and we've got Vigo Bjork still available here at the eighth overall selection, and then that's really just a product of how many really good defensemen are on the board this year and how many teams need to select defensemen or should be selecting defensemen. Because Vigo Bjork in a lot of drafts would be a lock for a top five pick. He just has a ton of speed and offensive IQ, good shooting ability, good playmaking. Like there's a lot to love about his game. He's listed as center slash wing. I think he'll be more of a winger at the next level, but it'll be interesting to kind of see what whoever drafts him kind of says about him after they pick him, whether they think of him more as a center or if they think of him more of as a winger. And definitely by the time he gets to training camp, they'll kind of be able to get a look at him and see how they want to use him. But I think there's some flexibility there, which is nice. But overall, just really an interesting and very dynamic player. In a lot of ways, reminds me of Jesper Bratt from the New Jersey Devils. Next up, the San Jose Sharks, who have now ended up with the ninth overall pick that came through Florida and then Ottawa and then to them in the William Eklund deal. And they get a golden opportunity to bring in another really strong defenseman to a team that is definitely needing to increase on their back end as much as possible, even despite some of the moves they've already made. And I really like the fit of Albert Smits here. I think he brings a dynamic to this team that they kind of don't already have all that well in terms of the upside that he brings. And he is a really good shutdown defender, possibly the best shutdown defender in this entire draft. He is no slouch really offensively, but he's not an offensive defenseman by any means. He won't kill a play, but he also isn't going to be driving the offense. But his ability to use his physicality to shut down plays along the wall, his puck battle ability, his positioning, his stick work, I mean, that they're all qualities of a top pairing shutdown NHL defenseman. Not too unlike a guy like Jacob Slavin, in my opinion. So he is definitely a really fun one to watch for this top 10 just because of the skill set that he brings. I think he's very fit specific. So for teams that aren't necessarily looking for a power play defenseman, but are more looking for somebody who can, you know, help check other teams' top lines in the long term future. That is kind of more what you can expect from him, and where he might end up. You know, a team that kind of is looking for that type of player. With the 10th overall pick, I have the Nashville Predators selecting Ethan Belchetz, and he's a guy whose film I really liked when I went back to watch it recently. The thing about Belchetz that might hold him back a little bit in some people's eyes is he's not the fastest or greatest skater, but he plays a style of game where he almost doesn't need the speed. He does such a good job of protecting the puck with his size. He's 6'5", just under 230 pounds, so very large player at this stage in his development, and who knows, may still even get a little bit bigger. But he's very strong. Like sometimes you see these big bodied junior players that don't really use their size to their advantage. He is definitely not like that. He absolutely uses his size. He's got a great shot. If you see his one timers on the power play, I mean, he might be one of the hardest one timer shooters in this entire draft, which is another really impressive trait of his. And despite his relative lack of speed, he still gets in behind the defense sometimes because I think he's an effective skater who has definitely gotten a few breakaway goals this year as well. Really great hands, which really helps him in space. And is another reason why the lack of speed isn't all that big of an issue because he really uses his hands to create space, whereas other guys might need to use their speed. Overall, he does remind me a little bit of Brady Tkachuk in terms of style. A lot of his goals look very Brady Tkachuk esque, and a lot of what I just said about him can also really be said about Brady too. Belchester is known to drop the gloves from time to time too, so he's a really well-rounded and physical guy too. So I think there definitely are some aspects of his game to improve on. He's not like a 200-foot player by any means, but I don't necessarily think he has to be. He's more of a finisher than a play driver, so probably would want to get him on with a couple of playmaking players who can create some space for him as well. He's also really hard to move in front of the net. So a lot of really great attributes, and I think all of that kind of leans towards a prospect that Nashville really like to add to their system. Because if you look at some of their wingers, it's definitely not their strong point right now in terms of prospect depth. And I do think that they're kind of in the middle of what looks to be a really solid prospect retool with some of the guys they've drafted over the last couple of years. Brady Martin looks like he's going to be really good, for example. So it'd be really interesting to see kind of how they continue to operate over the next little while. With the 11th overall pick and the first of four picks that St. Louis currently owns in this draft, I have them selecting Tynan Lawrence. Worth noting, I don't think they're going to use all four of these picks in the first round this year. I would be surprised if they don't move at least one of those for a player, or maybe potentially move down. They have, I believe, the most draft picks out of anybody over the course of the entire draft. So I think that kind of spells the possibility for a lot of moving up or potentially just moving those picks for players who are ready to play for them right now. But with that being said, I have them selecting Tynan Lawrence here, who at the start of the season was, for many people, their top center because he looked very strong to start the year at Muskegon. He had 7 goals in 10 games, I believe, and through the start of the season there before switching over to Boston University in January. So one of the challenges that comes from a player switching to a university team halfway through the season is the pecking order has kind of already been established in that lineup, so it's really hard to kind of break the mold and become a top 6 player there. So Tynan Lawrence wasn't really utilized as much as he was obviously in the USHL, being a star player there. and being a freshman, just kind of jumping into a lineup halfway through the season. But there are definitely still a lot of traits to like with him. There's a lot of speed there. He's got a good release. I think his playmaking abilities are really solid. So there's a lot of offensive traits to really like. I think he's got to become a bit more of a well-rounded player. I didn't like his battles in corners, for example, and I think he definitely leaves a little bit to be desired as far as being a 200-foot player as a center. And as we know in the modern NHL right now, all centers kind of have to have that aspect to their game. So it'd be interesting to see how things look for him next season as he has an increased role at Boston University, or I would at least anticipate that he will. But I think the upside is there that he's definitely kind of a guy to go in this general range. And I think he's a good option for the St. Louis Blues, who are really starting to put together a larger cabinet of prospects right now. So a lot of options to kind of swing on. So getting another guy that has pretty strong upside definitely bodes well for them in the long term. With the 12th overall pick, I have the New Jersey Devils selecting Adam Novotny. So for most of my mock drafts over the course of the offseason, I have almost always had them getting Ethan Belchetz, but I kind of saw the opportunity for him to go a little bit higher this time around. I thought that he was a really good fit for what New Jersey wants, and what I think they want is more scorers in their top six. And once Belchetz was kind of off the board, I felt like Adam Novotny kind of fit that mold a fair bit as well. He's more of a pure shooter, not as big of a body, but still a relatively solid size. Doesn't use his physicality super well, but again, he's just a really strong guy who uses that when he shoots the puck. Might be the best pure shooter available in this draft, so definitely a plus side there as well. And he gets to the gritty areas of the ice and scores some deflection goals and stuff like that. Similar to Belchetz, I would describe him as not being a play driver. So I think the opportunity of getting him into a line that has either Jack Hughes or Nico Hischier on it, I think that bodes well for him in the long term. Next up, we got Wyatt Cullen going to the New York Islanders, and I think he's been probably, for most people, and myself included, one of the biggest risers in this draft. I think that over the course of his season at the U.S. development program, we really got to see his skill shine through. He's got really good hands, deking ability, his passing ability is quite good as well, and he's got a nice little release as well. So just a really good, well-rounded offensive talent. Definitely could work on a bit of a two-way game to kind of increase his value overall. But he's going to get that chance because he's going to be going to college in the near future. I don't know off the top of my head if he's committed for next season, but I would imagine he probably is. So that will be important for his development. And overall, I think the Islanders are just in a good place with regards to their prospect pool right now, where they can kind of just take the best player available and the highest kind of upside player. And I think at this stage, that's definitely Wyatt Cullen. With the 14th pick, we got the Columbus Blue Jackets selecting Ryan Lynn. I think all season it was really hard to pick for the Blue Jackets because I think they have a lot of really good pieces locked in long term, so it was kind of hard to find where their biggest need was. But I do think that they're a little bit weak on the right side of defense in terms of not only who they have now, but also their prospects. They did do well to draft Jackson Smith in the first round last year, but obviously he's on the left side. They've kind of run into a situation where they've had to use a lot of left-sided defensemen on the right side, and I don't think that that's necessarily working out all that well for them. So I think that targeting a guy like Ryan Lynn, who originally in the season I definitely had him a little bit lower on my board, but I've kind of come around on him a little bit more because my biggest concern with him was I didn't think that he was all that strong of a defensively minded player, but I've kind of changed my tune on that. I think that he actually does show quite a bit of defensive upside on top of being a really good puck mover. I think that his puck moving can be a little bit risky at times. I think that he might have to calm it down a little bit when he comes to the NHL. But I think that there's definitely a lot to work with here in terms of his tools. He's obviously a little bit undersized, so will need to put on a little bit of muscle, I think, to be successful at the next level. But you definitely got the mold of a player who could be successful at the NHL level, and somebody who can step in and kind of help them out on the right side of the fence. With the 15th overall pick, I've got the St. Louis Blues selecting J.P. Hurlburt, who has been one of my favorite wingers to watch in this year's draft cycle. One of the most productive players in the WHL this year. I had 40 plus goals and 50 plus assists, I believe. So kind of proved himself to be a real two-way threat in terms of scoring and passing. Definitely a guy who has a lot of speed off of the wing, really good hands. His offensive IQ is just really high in general. He has had a lot of highlights where he's kind of stealing and the puck off the defenders on the forecheck, and then creating kind of good rush plays off of that. So I definitely think, again, with regards to the Blues, who have so many picks, I think that they just got to swing on upside as much as possible, as it looks like they're kind of entering into a bit of a either retool or full rebuild following the trade of Jordan Kyrou. And we'll kind of keep an eye on how things go with some of their other high profile players like Pareko and Robert Thomas. With the 16th overall pick, we got the Blues again. This actually being the pick that they received for Jordan Kyrou. So I have them selecting Malte Gustafsson. So a bit of a sizey left-handed defenseman, mainly a shutdown guy, not overly strong on the puck moving side, but not necessarily a weakness to his game either. I think he's definitely a bit of a developmental guy. He spent most of the season playing in the under 20 league in Sweden. But I definitely do like the upside there with him as a potential shutdown guy. And again, the Blues are going to have to take some guys with kind of a variety of skill sets here. So it kind of makes sense for him to kind of land in this spot. For me, I do have him a little bit lower on my list. Just in general, I think the left defenseman shutdown guys like him aren't necessarily the most valuable prospects in the world, but I think when you have a lot of picks to work with, I think it's worth taking guys like this. At some point, and obviously with how many picks they have, they can kind of use an early one on him here. Next up, I've got the LA Kings selecting Alexander Command, who is probably one of the harder projectables for me right now, because he flashed so much talent this year, playing in the Swedish under 20 league as a really good two-way threat offensively. From the center position, and I do think that the Kings really do need centers long term. Obviously, with Kopitar retiring, and right now Byfield really being the only strong center that they currently have in their in the franchise for the next little while. So I do think that this is the type of player they need to be targeting. I think there's a few options of centers they could look at. Like Command is probably the most offensively gifted, but I do think that like Oliver Savanto could end up in a position like this. You could look at like Maddox Dagenet as well. So it all comes down to kind of what you see the upside of these players as being. But I do think the Command, while being maybe a riskier pick, could really pay off for the LA Kings. With the 18th pick, we have the Washington Capitals selecting Elton Hermanson, so a bit of a sniper winger type of player. So when you kind of start to think about this team's identity long term, obviously they've made a couple of moves the last couple of days, bringing in Kyrou and Tuck on the both right-handed wingers, but they've kind of got a logjam at the right side right now, so they're going to have to move some of their right-handed players to left. That being said, I think targeting a left winger would be in their best interest. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, Elton Hermanson, I think he might actually be a right-handed player. But anyways, that being said, I just think his skill set just really fits what they're looking for. So I think that he definitely fits in this kind of spot in the draft, and I think that bringing in another scorer, and maybe you'll use him kind of like Ovechkin, where Ovechkin played on the left side despite being a right-handed shot. So definitely, could think about it that way. Next up, with the 19th overall pick, we've got the Utah Mammoth selecting Xavier Villeneuve. For me, this has kind of been a lock for a long time. I keep penciling him in here because I don't think that anybody should take a swing on him any earlier than this, but I think that Utah's kind of the perfect spot to take a swing on him. There's a lot to like about his game offensively. He's probably one of the best pure puck moving defensemen in this draft. He's got really shifty skating and really scans the ice well, looking for breakout passes, and has good hands and all those good qualities. The unfortunate side to his game is that he's just quite small. Needs to put on quite a bit of muscle to be able to handle the physicality of the NHL. He already doesn't handle physicality all that well at the QMJHL level, and definitely has to improve on his defensive side of the game. But I think Utah's got such a good prospect pool coming up in general, especially with their offense, with guys like Aginla coming soon, and quite a bit of good depth there as well. I do think that targeting the defense does make sense, and looking for a guy who's kind of toolsy and has the upside to potentially work a power play for you. I think that makes a lot of sense for Utah and where they're at right now. Next up, we've got the Buffalo Sabres selecting Oscar Hemming. Now, for me, I don't know if I could justify personally taking him this high, but when you look at the Buffalo Sabres and what they're starting to build and what a lot of their prospects kind of look like, they don't really necessarily have a guy who looks like Oscar Hemming, so that kind of like power winger style player. He is, he's 6'4", just over 200 pounds. Like he's definitely a good size player with a lot of physicality. He's another kind of interesting situation, kind of similar to Tynan Lawrence, where he didn't join Boston College this season until halfway through the year. So just kind of had to get himself established in there this year, and as a result, his production wasn't great. That also came from the fact that due to a few different complications, he did not start the year playing on a team until January. So was probably just a little bit out of practice, a little bit, not ready for the competition level that he was heading into. So I think with him, he's definitely a very projection based pick for a lot of people, and a lot of people do have him ranked in the first round. Um, so I think that if that's the type of player you're looking for, and you're hoping that the development is just going to continue to rise over the next couple of years, because people really liked what he was 2 years ago. Coming into the year, a lot of people thought he had the upside of being a potential top 10 pick. So I think when you're kind of in that spot where your team has so many prospects coming up, and you're kind of sitting in the spot, you can kind of take a swing on a guy who you don't really necessarily know where he's at yet, but you'll get a better read on him next year, and it could really pay off in big dividends for them. Next up, the Philadelphia Flyers select Maddox Dagenet. So this one, I kind of went back and forth on this for a little bit, because I know the last 2 years the Flyers have used relatively high picks on centers, and even specifically last year on a fairly tall center. For my personal view, I'm not the biggest fan of Jack Nesbitt. I think that he has a lot of limitations that will hold him back from being a good NHL center. I do like Lutsenko. I think that they maybe reached on him a little bit, but I think he's shown a lot of improvement over the last couple of seasons in the OHL. I also think that Lutsenko played a little bit of wing to get the opportunity to play on a line with Kill Malhotra at times this past season. So I do think that that's a possibility, and I do think that it's a possibility that a guy like Dagenet could also move to the wing. Now, a lot of things to like about Dagenet. He's a very physical, big centerman with 200-foot game upside and good playmaking ability. I think he really fits the mold of the way that the Philadelphia Flyers play. And I think that, in a lot of ways, his upside is a lot higher than this range in the draft. But I don't see him going higher than here very often. So this is kind of a good landing spot for him, I think. Next up, we got the Pittsburgh Penguins, and I have them going with Nikita Klipov, a very talented offensive winger out of the Saginaw Spirit. Now, he played in a very offensive system there. He wasn't really asked to do a lot in the defensive zone, so I think there's going to be a little bit of a development curve for him to be able to make it at the next level. But I do think that where Pittsburgh is at in their current situation, obviously, they've only got a few years left of guys like Crosby, and maybe this is the last year of Evgeny Malkin as well. So right now they're really just looking to bring in some identity guys, some guys who can, really bring a lot of talent to the future of the Pittsburgh Penguins. And when you look at this kind of range here, very few guys break the talent ceiling that Nikita Klipov has. Next up, and I've kind of broken a rule that I typically don't break during these mock drafts, but I do have a trade here because I do believe that the Ruck Twins are going to both be going in the first round of this draft, but I don't think that anybody is going to really value them that highly unless they can get both of them. I do see a really great opportunity for Vancouver to jump up here and pick both of them. They obviously have the next pick at 24. So I do have them sending both of their second round picks in this year's draft to the Boston Bruins. So that's pick 33 and I believe about 45, something around that range, maybe 41. Overall, I think that's good value for both sides. Some Boston fans might be a little bit upset to not take a swing on one of these premier first round type of guys. But I do think that Boston also could see the upside of kind of just using it as an opportunity to get an extra pick. The 33rd overall pick is like basically a first round pick when you think about it as well. And some of the guys that they might want to target probably, like I thought about it this way at least, that some of the guys that they wanted or would potentially want, they might be reaching on at this stage to take them. So I did move them back, and we'll kind of talk about some of their picks once we get into the overall 7 round draft summary. But I do have the Vancouver Canucks coming up here to take one of the Ruck twins. This is Liam Ruck, and then of course with the 25th or 24th overall pick, I have them selecting Marcus Ruck. I think this just makes a lot of sense in terms of fit. They're both from BC. Obviously, the Sedins are now a big part of the decision making now with the Vancouver Canucks, so I can see them really seeing the value in keeping these brothers together. Um, they're both very offensively talented players, albeit with still a development curve yet to come. But they're very they play a lot on the exterior in the offensive zone. They don't like to get through the middle. They don't really play in the corners all that much, but true power play specialists. They're great on the rush. A lot of speed, playmaking, offensive IQ, just generally. Just probably just need to get a little bit stronger, get a little bit braver getting through the center of the ice to really round out their games. And I think if you're Vancouver and you're really starting to go through your rebuild here, grabbing a pair of twins who can play one's a right shot and one's a left shot, so you get two like a left winger and a right winger there for the long term in your top six that have incredible chemistry like they do. I think that that's a really fun pick for Vancouver. Next up, we got the 25th overall pick with the Ottawa Senators selecting Simas Ignatavicius from the Swiss League and a Lithuanian born player. So we haven't seen a lot of Lithuanians since Dinas Zubris was in the league. Um, he's got a really interesting profile as a prospect. He is one of the oldest first year eligible players in this year's draft cycle, but he really showed a lot of talent and poise playing in the top Swiss division this year, a division that hasn't really allowed a lot of younger players that type of ice time in recent years. Like you think about maybe Reinbacher would be the only other guy who got that kind of premier opportunity to play at this level. And I really like a lot of what Simas Ignatavicius shows. He's got great hands, but he's also a good two-way player. He's got flexibility to play center and the wing. I think that really fits what Ottawa needs long term. I do think that the wing is definitely the place that they're going to be targeting. But it won't necessarily be these really high upside guys. I think it'll be the high character, well-rounded type of guys to kind of fill out the style that they play. So I think that this definitely could be a way for this player to get into the first round. Otherwise, I think he might slip into kind of the early second. Next up, we've got the Rangers taking the falling Oliver Savanto. He's a guy that I definitely have ranked a lot higher. I actually have him, I think, around 11th or 12th on my rankings, just off my memory there. But it is a little bit hard to find a fit for him because I think that he kind of caps out as a really good third line center and maybe a second line center. So for one of these teams to kind of take him early on, it's a little bit tough because I don't think there's as much of a big swing on upside there. But I think for him to fall here to the Rangers, who just need really quality prospects down the stretch, he would definitely fill a role that the Rangers currently don't have filled. I definitely like the fit here, and obviously there is still some talent that he could develop. Maybe he becomes a second line center for you. Next up, we have the 27th overall pick and the Sharks selecting Juho Piparinen. So we already have them selecting Albert Smits and Ivar Stenberg earlier in the draft. Now we get them a right defenseman with Juho Piparinen. So I think this just kind of fills out some more of the depth that they're looking to add on defense. Really smart shutdown defensive defenseman, good skater. Um, Not a ton of offensive upside, but that might come along with time. Next up, we got the Montreal Canadiens. I have them selecting Adam Valentini, one of my favorite players in terms of overlooked value in this draft. But I think this is kind of a more fair place to put him, just considering some of the knocks on him being a little undersized and not a super strong skater. But I think he, kind of battles through all that with good physical play and just a tenacious willingness to get into the corners and win battles and really talented, high offensive IQ. Overall, just a guy that I think has a really good profile for being a future NHL player, even if it isn't at the high talent ceiling that some people were kind of hoping for him. But I do think that that's still a possibility as well. I did want to get Montreal a center here, but I didn't really like the value on any of the centers on the board. So I think that grabbing a good toolsy winger like him makes sense at this stage. Next up, we got the St. Louis Blues selecting Nicholas Aram Olsen, one of the speedier wingers in this draft and one of the best pure shooters as well. He's got a really high motor and a really good shot. Again, I think that these are just all traits that St. Louis can really swing on for guys like this right now. Next up, we've got the 30th overall pick and the Calgary Flames selecting the tall but slightly skinny Nikita Sherbakov. I think that this is a very developmental pick. Personally, he is ranked in the mid-second round for me. But I do think that Calgary is looking for left defensemen. This draft will be very focused on forwards and left defensemen, in my opinion, because they've pretty much got the right side of their defense more or less figured out with Nemec and Perek, and potentially Verstevich, potentially Whitecloud, depending on how long he sticks around. I think there's a fair bit of depth on the right, not a fair bit of long-term depth on the left. So I think that Sherbakov is a good one to target. Definitely plays a good shutdown game in Russia. Has a little bit of KHL experience already. Just needs to get a little bit stronger. Could definitely use a bit more of a physical element to his game. And I do think there's some offensive upside there too, although I don't think it's the biggest strength of his game. Definitely a bit more of a long term, down the road type of guy. Next up, we've got the Carolina Hurricanes selecting Ilya Morozov, and I kind of love this fit right now. Would have liked to get him in higher, but again, I think he kind of caps out as a really good third line center for somebody, so that might hurt his value just a little bit, despite the fact that I really love the traits on this guy. I've seen him compared to Jared Stahl, which would be sorry, not Jared Stahl. That's the fourth Stahl brother, Jordan Stahl. So that would be kind of the perfect fit as Jordan Stahl kind of starts to age and potentially leaves retires in a couple of years. So to kind of bring in a guy like Ilya Morozov who might be able to seamlessly transition into the role that he plays there, I think that would be a really big plus for the Hurricanes. So I think the fit is just kind of perfect there. And with the last pick in the first round, I have the Ottawa Senators selecting Chase Harrington from the Spokane Chiefs, a player who is kind of described as being a really talented agitator. So I think that kind of also fits the mold of something that Ottawa's looking for, especially after the loss of Brady Tkachuk. So I think Chase Harrington just brings a lot of energy. Might kind of bring a similar game to what you get with Ridley Gregg. He's a right shot, so get him on the right wing there. Fill potentially a spot there for the long term that Claude Giroux is only going to hold for one more year probably. So just another nice developmental piece for the Ottawa Senators to include in their offense there. So next up, we're going to talk about the 7 rounds that I kind of went through for each of the teams. We're probably not going to go into too much depth on individual players here. If you want to kind of take a look at what I did for your team, you can pause the video and just kind of look up some of the players if you haven't heard of them before. Yeah, so starting with the Anaheim Ducks and the Boston Bruins. Anaheim, obviously, without a first round pick currently. So I have them starting out their draft with a right handed defenseman from Slovakia, Adam Golier. Looking at the Boston Bruins, who were able to trade down to the second round, they're able to get a really quality right-handed defense prospect there with Tommy Blyle, and also a guy described to be the most physical forward in the draft in Gleb Pugachev. Definitely a few other interesting value picks. I really like them getting Jonas Lagerberg Hohen in the third round. Big goaltender Philip Ruzicka, for example. And then we got Buffalo. Obviously, we talked about their first two picks, getting Viktor Fyodorov, one of the better Russian prospects available. Um, got the Calgary Flames, who just have a plethora of second round picks this year. So we see them getting guys like Thomas Shranko, um, probably the most notable guy to talk about there in their second round. And then we've got Carolina, just the four picks this year, although worth looking into Dmitry Ivchenko, one of the youngest goalies available in this draft, who had quite a solid year in the Russian under 20 league. Then we got the Chicago Blackhawks, who are a surprise late addition to not being a pick in the first round this year after acquiring Bowen Byram for the fourth overall pick. So they get their first selection at the 34th pick, which I have them taking shutdown right defenseman Georgios Pantelis. I also have them taking Mathis Preston, who I think has a lot of development to be worthy of being an NHL player in terms of his offensive IQ. I think he's a very talented player who just needs to spend a lot more time watching film, basically. Um, Moving on to the Colorado Avalanche, who have probably one of the most interesting drafts coming in the history of the draft because they don't pick until the third round, the 74th pick, and yet they have one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine draft picks from between there and the seventh round. So this should be a really interesting experiment in their scouts' abilities to find some late round talent there. I would imagine that at least one of those guys hit. I think they'll lean kind of on the side of grabbing some of the older prospects in this draft that have proved themselves to be quite interesting, like Ethan McKenzie, for example. But it'll be interesting to kind of see what they do over the next little bit. And then, of course, we got the Columbus Blue Jackets. Alan, I can't say that last name, Shahizlamov, I think, is definitely an interesting Russian prospect to keep an eye on this year, as well as defenseman Alexander Sapoznikov. Dallas, not a lot of picks to work with this year and no first round picks, but I do like them getting Timofey Runso in the second round. They just need some more depth long term on the right side of defense, and he's a good puck mover. Um, Looking at the Detroit Red Wings, I have them coming into the draft selecting Pierce Mbuyi. So definitely a good upside offensive winger out of the Owen Sound attack. Then we've got the Edmonton Oilers, only the four picks to work with, but getting a nice playmaking winger from the Everett Silvertips and Matthias Van Hanen would be solid for them, as well as one of the better goalie prospects in this draft with Harrison Boddicker. And then, of course, we've got Florida taking the first goalie off the board in the second round there with Tobias Treball. Among a few other picks, I really like Sawyer Dingman. I think he's one of the better physical fourth line options in the draft, so a really good fit for the long term in Florida. Looking at the LA Kings, who have quite a lot of picks to work with, I did definitely want to look at the left side of defense for them, so they get good value with William Hawkinson in the second round. Not a lot of picks to work with for the Minnesota Wild. They don't get in until the third round, but I do like Ryan Brown as a potential developmental pick. He just looked so much better in the second half of the season once he left Sarnia once he left Sarnia and went to London. And we got the Montreal Canadiens. Obviously, they always find some value in the later rounds. I definitely like this Dakota Rome Mullen pick for them, potentially as a right-handed defenseman for the future. And we've got the Nashville Predators making a lot of selections. Samu Aloha is definitely an interesting developmental right-handed defenseman prospect to keep an eye on for this draft process, as well as Jakob Flores. New Jersey, I got them selecting two-way centerman Jack Hextall in the second round, as well as Måns Gudmundsson, who is one of the younger defensemen available in this draft, and definitely has a lot of tools that can make him successful. Interesting player to look at here, Oliver Schustrom, was potentially a guy who could have gone in last year's draft. That didn't happen, but then he went to the Allsvenskan this year, the second tier of Swedish hockey, and played quite well there. So may see himself get called in one of the later rounds this year. Then we got the Rangers, who were able to get Carls and Savanto in the first round, and then just had kind of a plethora of depth options. Had them selecting Ryder Fedorov, one of my favorite goalies in this draft, just in case something happens with Shesterkin, if potentially this team starts to go into a full downward spiral with selling off players. You never know, so you definitely want to have a lot of depth at with goaltending prospects. Then we got the Ottawa Senators, who were able to select local Ottawa 67's player Thomas Vandenberg, and another one of my favorite goalies in the draft, Patrick Plumans. And then short draft here for the Philadelphia Flyers, but I do like Luke Scherer as good defensive right-handed defenseman value in this second round. And then we got the Penguins, who get the biggest defenseman in the draft in Maxim Sokolovsky, probably the most physical defenseman as well. They get themselves a goalie there as well as William Lassell. San Jose Sharks, kind of outside of the first round. Not a lot going on after these first three picks, but I do like Vlasov's upside, and then just kind of a couple of guys that you're just kind of taking swings on. I like Casey Mutrin for Seattle in the second round, probably a future third line right winger, just a little bit of physicality and power. Landon Amrine, kind of the same way, but on the left side. They get themselves a goalie as well with Shalavik. And then we got the many picks of the St. Louis Blues. So outside of the first four, like Vanacek, Sivertson, one of the other best goalies in the draft, the number one goalie on my board, I think, in Borachev. Um, Benjamin Kosset-Ayad is a guy that I like as well. Bruno Osmanis is a guy who missed his draft last year who looks interesting as well. Tampa Bay getting Zelensky, Van Hatalo, Brady Noling, for who a lot of people at the start of the year was their top goalie, but he kind of struggled this year. And we got the Leafs taking Gavin McKenna, and then really great value with Ben McBeath in the second round. Good two-way option at defense on the left side. My favorite Russian prospect in this draft, Lavar Gashalov, who not a lot of people are talking about, so I could definitely see him being available in this kind of range. But personally, I think that he is actually a first-round talent. Cooper Williams, a good forechecking winger with offensive upside. And then we've got the Utah Mammoth taking Kasper Yustavara Carlson, so a guy who is productive in the SHL but a little bit undersized. Is a first-year draft-eligible player, so definitely an interesting name to keep an eye on. Adam Nemec, who was good with Sudbury this year as well. Then we've got the Vancouver Canucks, who obviously we had taking Chase Reed and the Ruck Twins, but then they bank on the upside of offensive winger Noel Pakarainen, physical defensive defenseman Charlie Morrison in there as well, slightly undersized goaltender Gavin Betts, but definitely athletic and talented, and then also Joe Aginla, who obviously Jerome Aginla being from Western Canada, and I think was it Joe Aginla that actually ended up finishing his season in Vancouver this year? I'm trying to remember, but that sounds right to me. Then we got the Vegas Golden Knights, who I think are just going to kind of focus on, with their first pick, just taking somebody that they think could actually come in sooner rather than later. And I think nobody fits that bill better than Thomas Galvis as one of the best 20-year-old players in this draft, in terms of being one of the most dominant pro players available. He missed multiple drafts, but has really proven to be a dynamic skater and playmaker as an offensive defenseman on the back end. Then we've got the Capitals, took Hermanson, getting Andrei Molgachov as well, good value, and Matveyev, who is a good right defenseman in the under-20 league in Russia. Then we got the haul for the Winnipeg Jets, which includes Viggo Bjork, Axel Ilofsson, Iko Leitinen, who I like as well. And I kind of late in the cycle kind of found Emil Sabi Jakobsen, a Norwegian defenseman who definitely looks Is he Norwegian or Danish? I'm blanking on that. I don't want to get that wrong, but either way, it looks like a great profile to potentially turn into something as a late round pick who might get some more opportunities next year. So overall, that's my 7 round mock draft. Obviously, some of these draft picks are likely to change hands between now and the draft. So some of these teams might end up with fewer picks than this or more. And obviously, I don't expect that the first round order is going to remain exactly as it is right now because there's already been so much more movement than there typically is in an average draft year. So I do think that trend is going to continue as a number of teams are looking to shop out some of the top talent across the league with their draft picks. But overall, just let me know what you guys think down below. Do you think that I picked the right player for your team? And if not, please let me know down below who you would have selected in that situation. And yeah, as this draft cycle starts to come to the end, we're going to start shifting to some off-season content. So in the next couple of days, we're going to start to talk about some of the top pending free agents. So make sure that you are subscribed and ring the bell for notifications so that you are ready to watch those videos when they come out.